Leng Mo told him he had really missed this place and asked him to leave it to him. He assured him that he was going to train all these men like tigers. Qianhao was glad that things had gone smoothly and was hoping Leng Mo was going to become a great force for them in the future. Since there were no objections, he was going to be put in charge immediately. He asked him if he had any other needs. Leng Mo jokingly said that his original title, Evil Lord, sounded too scary and he wanted a new one. He suggested that Fire sounded like a good name. Qianhao said it sounded fine and told him to do whatever pleased him. Leng Mo told Bing Yu he would be called Ice, and together they would be Ice and Fire. The prisoners in the camp had been staring at them. Leng Mo could tell it was the same as the first time he had entered. Everyone's eyes seemed to be full of despair and ready to kill. A man greeted Qianhao. He called him over to meet Leng Mo, introducing him as the new battalion commander, nicknamed Fire. The man introduced himself as Linde, and Leng Mo told him he was going to be working with him from now on. He first asked him to assemble everyone. The prisoners didn't know what was going on, but rumors had spread about a new commander. Once everyone had gathered, Linda introduced Leng Mo as their new commander. The people's expressions didn't change. He then asked Leng Mo to say a few words. He began by saying that he was their commander now and would be fighting with them. With a smirk, he added that he was going to try his best to keep all of them alive. The prisoners looked at him like he was an idiot. All of a sudden, they began laughing at him. His words seemed ridiculous to them. It didn't seem possible to keep everyone alive. They thought he was insane saying such a thing. Leng Mo knew that words alone weren't enough to encourage his soldiers. They had already lost faith in living, but he needed to change that. He told them to just wait, and they would see if he was serious or not. He then decided the meeting was over and told them they were dismissed. They began talking about how he was just a child and probably had no idea what this place was. Some even began thinking of running away, since they would probably die sooner if they stayed with him. His deputy tried to console him, saying that they had already been here for a very long time, so their attitudes were expected to not be that good, and asked him to forgive their behavior. Leng Mo asked him if he thought he was joking. Linde told him he would never doubt his commander, but it was still very difficult to do what he had just said. Leng Mo understood what he was trying to say, and asked him if he had a minute to come to his tent and discuss something. He first asked Linda to brief their situation. Linda began by saying that they had 10-24 soldiers along with 10 centurions. Centurions were all advanced warriors, but their lowest-level warriors, on the other hand, were just beginners. He himself was a lower sword warrior, and explained that those who were weak couldn't survive here for long. Leng Mo asked them about their budget. He had barely seen anyone with armor on them. He also inquired about their meals. Linda explained that the Dare to Die group only had a third of what the regular army received. They only got 200 golden coins per month, and because all soldiers had criminal records, they only received 1 meal per day in order to keep them malnourished and weak. Their armor was also just junk from previous wars. The department had only given them regular blades, and the blades were not even enough for each of them to have one. Leng Mo figured that the group had been left in the same condition as before. Those in charge of these troops mostly used them as cannon fodder, so their provisions weren't required to be equal to the regulars. He asserted that they needed an immediate change. Just to confirm, he asked if there were any rules to restrict his soldiers. Linda told him that they were going to be dead anyway, and rules would mean nothing to them. As long as they didn't cause chaos or run away, everything was fine. It was decided then. Leng Mo announced that from the next day onwards, he was going to be assigning them some training. There were also going to be some rules now. Linda tried to protest, but he insisted on proving that he was going to keep all of them alive. He handed Linda a 10,000 amethyst card, surprising him. He told him that it belonged to his personal property and was wondering how long it would last. Lin told him it could probably last them for a couple of years. This was perfect, and he ordered him to use this money for food. From now on, everyone was going to get 3 meals a day and they would need to be served as well. Vegetables, fruits, dairy, and meat had to be guaranteed in each and every meal, and after that, he would assign training for everyone. He just had to make sure that their nutrition was kept up first. But not everyone was going to get their 3 meals. He explained that he was going to implement a reward and punishment system in order to make them attend. He called it the bottom-out system. He was going to map out a set of training plans tonight, and only those who attended training the next day would get served 3 meals. In addition to that, the 30 soldiers under each centurion who had the worst performance wouldn't get their fancy meals either. They would only receive hard pieces of bread and vegetables, since he still needed to ensure that they didn't starve. Those who didn't attend training would only get 1 meal a day, and those who didn't attend any training sessions at all would get no food. Linda was really impressed and praised him for his idea. Leng Mo had already known about this system from Earth, where companies used it to encourage their employees to work harder. It would have been ideal to use this on the Dare to Die group since they had lost all hope to live. He just needed to wait and see now if the food could hype them up again. Leng Mo informed him that he would get into more details tonight while he could go and buy supplies. Linda promised to do his best. Leng Mo then turned towards Bing Yu and asked him if he wanted to be in charge of monitoring the training. He agreed, and Leng Mo instructed him to look for any soldiers that he thought were talented. He was to pick around 10 of them and could train them individually. In the future, his job was going to be assassinations since that was his specialty. He promised to keep that in mind, and the meeting was dismissed. Leng Mo asked the two of them to come back to him tomorrow morning, and they would go over their training plan. After that, Leng Mo began drawing out the plan. He tried to recall the training back in the Arbitrator Academy and the workouts he used to do back on Earth. The three of them gathered again on the second day, and after looking at the camp's current situation, Leng Mo finally decided to give out the final draft. The whole camp was called for an assembly again, and he announced their new training plans along with the rules. Just as he had expected, not even a fifth of the people had attended training. But he did not panic and continued according to plan. Food was brought out to the soldiers who had behaved well, and the second it was served, everyone was stunned. The soldiers hadn't eaten meat since joining the camp and started chewing like animals. It only took them a few minutes to finish everything that was given to them. The other soldiers looked jealous. On their next training day, everyone had showed up. Their faces were full of excitement and hope. Looking at their faces helped Leng Mo believe that his plans were working out. Night had fallen, and he was resting on his bed. He could tell that they were having a great start. The more they trained, the more likely they were to survive during the war. But he knew this was not enough. Their military equipment was poor, and not even a single person had a complete set of armor. They were still going to end up dying if they went out like this. He did have some money left, but since they were almost at war, all the crafters were busy working for the real army, and it was impossible for someone to make armor for them. 2 days later, at the morning, Leng Mo informed them that he would spend his time meditating for the rest of the day. He left Linda in charge of the camp and sneaked out towards Dwarf Village. He was going to order 1,000 pieces of armor, but he didn't want anyone to notice the dwarves. After a few hours, he finally reached the village and greeted his grandpa. Grandpa was glad to see him return home safely again, and he began telling them about his plans. He explained that he needed 900 pieces of light armor and 100 pieces of heavy armor. It seemed to be quite a large amount, but the 900 pieces were not required to be of high quality, so it would have been a piece of cake for the dwarves. The village consisted of 2 dwarf tribes now and had plenty of people to work. Grandpa told him it wouldn't be a problem. Leng Mo then brought out all the iron that was needed for crafting. He had bought it all from markets in the Sunset Empire. Grandpa immediately assembled almost everyone in crafting. Leng Mo also joined in, and finally, with the whole village's help, the armors had been completed in 3 days. The dwarves had even decided to give Leng Mo some extra weapons. He fitted all the items into his space and then left the village, heading back towards Sunset Empire. Leng Mo was resting with Silver. He asked him if he remembered this place. He had met Silver here many years ago. He had been shaking with fear when he had seen him fighting the snake for the first time. He had actually thought that Silver was going to eat him alive. Silver started playfully licking him. He decided they would sleep here tonight, but first they had to go hunt for dinner. It would have been nice if they could find a water bowl. It had been quite a while since he had eaten one. They began quietly searching through the forest and spotted a bull nearby. Leng Mo told Silver to get ready, but before they could do anything, a strange slime had made its way to the bull. Without a moment's notice, it changed in size and devoured the bull whole. It was paralyzed and unable to do anything. Leng Mo didn't believe that a slime was capable of such a feat. A weak little thing such as a slime could never have hunted down a water bull. The bull was quickly getting digested. He didn't understand what this creature was. The slime spit out its skeleton, satisfied with its meal. Leng Mo asked Silver if he knew what it was. Its digestive system seemed to be abnormally fast compared to anything he had seen before. Silver didn't know either. Just then, Phoenix joined in saying that it was a magencephalon. It was apparently one of the rarest familiars, and the adults even had the ability to overpower some legendary beasts. Leng Mo couldn't believe that it was the same level as a legendary beast, and to top it off, it was still somehow a juvenile. The slime spotted them and charged straight at them. The two jumped out of the way. Its speed was enough to turn Leng Mo serious. He could tell why it was able to overpower some legendary beasts. Leng Mo and Silver were now standing on either side of the slime. It looked both ways, confused on what to do. Leng Mo figured it wasn't that smart and wondered if it was trying to think. Phoenix explained that the reason it was not a legendary beast was because of its IQ. He was still not supposed to underestimate it, since it could digest all kinds of creatures. The slime compared them by their size and figured that it should go for the larger beast. It began speeding towards Silver, chasing him all around the forest. Leng Mo didn't know why it was doing so. Phoenix assumed that it might have been because Silver was bigger than him, and that it would have been easier to fill its stomach. Silver kept running for a bit before he had had enough and turned towards the slime. He let out a loud roar, enough to knock the slime back. It crashed against the tree and began trembling in fear at the sight of him. His face also seemed to add into the intimidation factor. The slime turned towards Lengmo and decided it would chase him instead. Lengmo was annoyed that it had figured out it couldn't beat Silver, so now it was after him. He had to kill it quickly, or else it would be too hard to lose it once it had caught him. Phoenix stopped him from doing so, saying that he had to catch such a rare familiar. It would be a waste if he just killed it. He told him he would increase his dwarf instinct so he could try and turn it into his familiar. Lengmo asked him if he was really sure about that since it didn't even seem that smart. The slime kept on chasing him. Phoenix assured him that its mentality wasn't that stable while it was a juvenile. Lengmo finally agreed to it. He suddenly stopped running and decided he would capture it with his spatial magic since he couldn't touch it. It should have been easy since it was not that smart. He quickly activated his magic and managed to trap it before it could touch him. He began sealing it inside a triangle. The slime seemed to be getting scared. It started panicking and hitting its container in order to try and escape. The container didn't budge and it was finally sealed. He figured this should be enough to hold it for a little while. Without wasting a moment, Phoenix started boosting his dwarf instinct and told him to hurry up and link with it. It was time for Lengmo to try and connect with the slime.